All right. Good evening and happy Thursday. Welcome to another month, another series of amazing podcast episodes with BGSO with Brown Girls Sound Off. I am Tony Woodland, and I am joined by my amazing co hosts, Edwina, Chantal, and Nafisa. All right, so ladies, first things first. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about this month. And but before we even get into all that, I know that there are, two in-class educators on this call. And so this week, we're almost at the end of Teacher Appreciation Week. So I'd be remiss if I did not say thank you so much, Nafisa and Edwina, for all that you do in the classroom, working with our children and supporting teachers in various ways. And thank you to all of you who are also watching, who may also be educators. Thank you so much for your service to our community in that way. So anyway, again, I want to jump right in because we're talking about mental health this month. And, I must state that, last month we were talking all about relationships. And in March, we started talking about identity. And in many ways, ladies, I'd love to just kind of hear your thoughts about this, but in many ways, all of these series actually tie so well into each other, right? We couldn't talk about relationships without bringing up how relationships impact our mental health. We couldn't talk about identity without talking about mental health matters. Did you all think about the same thing when we decided on this topic?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it was great that we last month also had Carrie Holland Lee, who is a therapist on, and she talked about mental health. I know she has a platform and is really trying to bring about a lot of awareness as well. So shout out to Carrie, and we'd love to have you on just to have some more discussions if you're willing. So let's jump into it. So I saw something on this website, right? And so this website is mentalhealthfirstaid.org.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this really simple infographic that actually had some statistics on it. Not a whole lot, right? I love numbers, I love data, but I also love when it's just enough for you to digest. So that's what I really loved about this infographic. And so I'll share with you all just a little bit about this infographic. So one of the items that was shared on there was that approximately 12 million women, that's a lot, 12 million women in the United States experience clinical depression each year, right? And so that's 12 million women for every 1 million men. So let that sink in, right? So there's a 12-to-1 ratio there. Another statistic that was presented on this infographic that I saw was every 3 minutes, a woman goes to the emergency room for prescription painkiller misuse or abuse. Every 3 minutes, that's happening here in our country, right? Every 3 minutes. And another one, actually, I have two more that I'm going to share. So another one was that risk factors for mental health disorders that disproportionately affect women include gender-based violence, socioeconomic disadvantage, income inequality, and responsibility for the care of others. I'm seeing some heads nod like, yes. And those of you who are out there watching and listening, please let us know if this is resonating with you. And the last thing that I'll share from here was that more than 30% of women will experience, wow, more than 30%, right, of women will experience an anxiety disorder compared to more than 19% of men. So, ladies, I know that again, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. I see Edwina's head, right? That sis, that was my exact reaction because it's one thing to know it. It's one thing to have this anecdotal evidence and you're kind of looking around, you're like, yeah, a lot of the women that I talk to openly express dealing with these things versus, not, some of the men, yeah, but most of the time I don't hear a lot of men talking about it. Right. And so I just wanted to know from you all in terms of the statistics that I've read and even your own experiences and what you've seen. What do you think that some of those gender-based experiences have to do with mental health? So when you think about, let's say, gender-based violence or gender-based discrimination, whether it's in the community, in the workplace, or even the way that we're socialized and brought up, like, what do you think that those factors have to do with mental health? How might they impact them? So Chantal, I really am dying to hear from you first.
I think that going back to a lot of the roles that we as women wear in our communities, and those roles that come with stress, right? And what do I mean by that? So a lot of times in our communities as women of color, we are working, we're moms, we're wives, and those are all separate roles, but within those individual roles comes individual stress that we take on to fulfill those roles. And so sometimes in our physical health and within our mental health, sometimes we're just not feeling our best. And in our community, especially communities of color, it's something that is normalized. When we're not feeling our best, when we're feeling out of sorts, it's something that is normalized. And we're beginning to have this conversation and say, no, you should be at optimal level. And if you're not feeling your best, then something is off. And if you're feeling, emotionally down or mentally down, that these are conversations we need to start having more and more, and encouraging our women in our community to explore that and talk about that and to deal with that.
Oh
So
my gosh. You know what you made me think about, Chantal, was I've been in circles and there have been lots of conversations about how, especially as women of color, like we wear, and I get it, right? So this is like no shade, but a lot of times we wear our struggles as badges of honor. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's what you were sort of also alluding to, right?
yeah,
Like it's
absolutely.
like, well, how many painful experiences have you been? Well, girl, that ain't nothing because I had to da 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 da, and I was almost, you know what I mean? And so then it's like we start running oppression Olympics even within our own in group, right? To see who can outrun who, rather than, as you stated, like, let's stop normalizing that. Like, yes, absolutely, pain and trauma are parts of life, right? We're going to experience pain, we're going to experience trauma, but let's not start to normalize that these are the ways that we should feel and these are the experiences we should have. And then, because when we do that, what we do is we don't pay attention to the work that we need to do to effectively and appropriately and sustainably come out of those situations and rise above those situations. Because otherwise, we think it's normal, it's nothing to fix, right? If I'm supposed to feel pain, then what do I need to go to therapy and counseling for? Why would I fix that? That's supposed to be my
Absolutely.
life, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. How about you, Edwina? What are you thinking?
There is like a million things happening in my head right now. First of all, I feel like mental health it's almost like this new topic. I feel like it's like just now presenting itself as something that we recognize and that we encourage people to go and seek help for. When you were talking about those statistics, it was like, oh my God, like clinical depression, painkiller abuse, gender based anxiety disorder, like all of those things. I feel like there has been time in my life where like depression has come up, like anxiety and things like that. But I think, like you all were saying, like women, not only, I mean, I guess is the normalized, I feel like sometimes it's not as a badge of honor. It's almost like we just have to keep going, right? So it's like there's the other half of the other women, and I would say like kind of like myself, where it's like, yeah, I recognize those things aren't okay, but it's like it's so much going on that women at times feel like they have to kind of like push through or like push those things away to keep going until we get to a point where it's like there's nowhere else to go because we become so depressed. So, like everything weighs on us and the mental like can no longer go forward. And the body then takes over, like the body completely shuts down. And so, when we think about that mental disorder, it really does affect us as a whole. So it does play into things like you'll see it in those different avenues that you talk about. with violence and, you know, the way that we're socialized, like all of those things, I feel like the mental plays a role in that. And so you'll see that when it goes untreated, unnoticed, or whatsoever, that we are affected.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I was really listening really carefully to a great point that you raised, right? I think, I still stand by, what I shared in terms of I think, you know, because I've seen and
Yeah.
I've participated in, I'm going to speak for I'm going to acknowledge I participated in oppression Olympics, right? And I do appreciate you also bringing in that other perspective in terms of, a lot of times we also share our stories with each other to let each other know that we're not alone, right? Right. And I think that that is really powerful too, because that's the other part is that when in our communities, because there's a lot of data that shows that we have less access to mental health resources for various reasons, right?
Mhm.
But because a lot of us are suffering alone and in silence, the sharing of our stories is so important. It is very important because it lets other women like us know, and even people who don't identify as women, right? It gives them, windows into our experiences to know that, hey, yeah, I may smile and still show up, but I need you to also know what it is that I've been through. This is also a part of my experience. This is also a part of me and my history as well. So I think that that's really really important. Yeah. So Nafisa, what do you think in terms of thinking again based on like gender based experiences? So whether it's gender based violence or discrimination, socialization, and I know Chantel brought up like our roles in the household. How do you think all that maybe plays into mental health in our community?
I was thinking a lot of things. It's funny that you said suffer in silence, because that's actually what I was going to lead with, because that's exactly what I thought about when I was listening to Edwina speak. And I think especially in the Black community, like mental health and seeking out help for mental health is so stigmatized that we often suffer in silence out of fear of being judged, a fear of people thinking we're quote unquote crazy, and we don't want to speak up and say that we need help or acknowledge that we're struggling with some things, which I think ultimately leads to, from us internalizing those things, leads to the depression, leads to the anxiety, because we just keep pushing through. And like Edwina said, like your body has rights over you, and yet eventually you're going to break down, and it's going to show up physically. It's going to show up in a whole bunch of different places if you just keep on going. You're not acknowledging really what you need to get work help with or assistance with. And I think it really starts like as a young age, especially in the Black community. It starts with, and maybe in other cultures too, but I can only speak about my own. Definitely with like our men or young boys telling them, don't cry, get it together. It's toughen up, toughen up. You can't cry, you can't show emotion. And I think I touched on our last episode, even with the our young Black girls. It starts young with that have to be strong. Like, and I had to check myself on that. And I talked about that a little bit last episode. Like, they're playing around, like, why are you playing around so much? Like, get it together, quit acting goofy, quit acting simple. It's like, let them be kids. Let them play around, let them be goofy. They don't have to, they have plenty of time to, have on that cape. We need to take the cape off too, because that's no longer serving us either. But it starts at a young age. And I feel like it's just like, is trauma. I feel like I feel like everybody's just suffering a little bit from some PTSD, honestly, and from little different things that is starting. I don't even think often it's even intentional. For most of the time it's unconscious, and unless you are like I became aware of it because of something I read, or I probably wouldn't even acknowledge. I'm like, dang, I do that. That's awful. But in a moment when I was doing it, I didn't even realize that I was doing that to my daughter. So, I had to check myself on that. So I think that it starts at a very young age in our community. And I think it's just how we're just raised, and it's not even like intentional.
I love the fact that you brought up that you kind of took it back and thinking about how we're even brought up, because I think that's where we can, absolutely, it's never too late to break cycles and to grow and to learn and do things differently. And I think a great deal of responsibility rests on our shoulders to do things differently, starting with the younger generation as well, right? And so that we can start to break some cycles earlier. I'm really pleased with, let's say, a lot of the schools who are starting to really incorporate a lot of mindfulness activities in the school day and starting to really include social emotional learning as part of the academic day. Kudos to the educators who are doing that, because I think that that's also needed. And I think back to my own experience in school where there was a lot of trauma and playground mess and stuff that happened. And I just wonder what might have been different had, some of these practices been put in place in my school, right? What might have been different in the way that we handle conflict, in the way that we internalize things, in the way that we also spoke about our needs or not, because we didn't, because to do that was weak. So you didn't dare cry. Somebody's picking on you. It might have hurt, but you can't show that it hurt. And then most of us, I mean, I went to neighborhood school. Then we also didn't go home and tell our parents either, right? So we internalize, oh yeah, it's just stuff that you just deal with. And so think about those messages. And yes, I'm a huge proponent of let them get a couple of cuts and bruises, right? To prepare them for life, right? But what I'm speaking on is like some of the things that our kids are often forced to learn on their own because they're not talking about it and because no one's asking them about it. So not only are they not openly talking about it a lot of times, but no one's saying, hey, how are your relationships going? Like, how are your friendships going? What's going on? We got to ask those questions, to start to break those cycles and let our kids know that, yeah, absolutely. What happened on that playground? That's my business too. What's going on in school? And as your kids grow older, parents of tweens, teens, and of dating age, what's going on in those relationships? Because we know a lot of gender-based violence starts really, really early. It's not just amongst adults and adolescents. For a lot of folks, you'd be surprised and I'm sure, Nafisa, you've seen this as a high school educator, as a middle and lower school educator. I've seen it show up in middle schools where there's gender-based violence in middle school, and the way that girls especially start to internalize what that means for her and the way she should view herself, the way that others can treat her or not. And all that plays a part in our mental health. Edwina, did you want to add something?
No, I was agreeing with you 100%, everything that you said. And I completely lost my train of thought just like that. It was something that you said, and I was like, oh my goodness, yes. And then the thought just went away. And
it's all good. Look, sis. Nafisa, did you want to?
I did, because when you said the balance thing, there was something that I did want to touch on that for the balance. And immediately what I thought about is particularly like, thinking of Black men and just the constant gun violence. I can't imagine having lost as many friends as my husband has. I mean, it has been at least 12. And that is like the norm for many Black men who grew up in inner city and things like that, have lost a lot of their friends to gun violence. I mean, people they grew up with. And that's something that I think about. And then going back to that, oh, you can't cry, you can't seem weak. And I don't think that that's like a trauma that they necessarily feel that they can speak up, that they maybe need to work through, and I think that's very prevalent in our community with our Black men.
Wow. I hadn't even considered that, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So like in this moment, I'm just thinking of like, what are the ways in which we perpetuate, the desensitization, around violence, like that part. You know what I mean? Like you're bringing up, like you're right. A lot of our Black men are losing a lot of their brothers, a lot of their friends.
Yes, brothers too. Yes.
Yes, a lot of wives are losing their husbands and their partners and their brothers. And now lots more women, Black women to gun violence. And, we see it so much that for many of us, it's like almost lost its shock value. And we're watching the numbers that appear on the, on the news stories, like, oh, so I absolutely do think about that. And what are some of the ways that then shows up in our relationships? Because I know this isn't all about relationships, but it's about mental health, right? because that impacts it. What are some of the ways that that ultimately shows up in our relationships, or whether it's within ourselves and impacts our mental health? How are we dealing with all that? That's kind of like what I'm left grappling with.
Yeah. So the
Um,
thought did come back to
yes, what is it?
so I was no, and I guess I was thinking more so like how to break that cycle, to know like this is something where you have adults who are currently dealing with these mental health issues since childhood. They now are parents, right? Grandparents or whatsoever. And their children know that doesn't have like any means or whatsoever. Like this is what they're seeing. Like we don't talk about these things. I don't ask questions, to see how my child's day is going or whatsoever. And so the child doesn't learn how to communicate, doesn't learn how to openly express, if something is wrong. So it's like, how do you break that cycle? So I guess I was just kind of thinking on that solution mindset of it, because it is very real. It is something that I always think about the children, those who are to come. And it's like, how can we stop this with us, with our age group, and up before they become us in a couple of years, where they have to they're still dealing with mental health issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I think about is because I know that, and we all know this because we're all parents on here. And if you are watching and you're also a parent or caregiver, if you agree or you know what I'm about to say, then please let me know in the chat. So wait for it. Here it comes. So you know how your child comes home from school, right? You ask them, how was your day? You get like either good or it was all right or whatever, right? But it's real short, right? And you're like, okay, I know something else. How's everything? Good, so, whatever. But so one thing that I know that I've started doing is actually creating other avenues for sharing, to make sharing a regular part of what we do. So if that makes sense, it's almost like kind of going around that, because the other times I'm pretty much with my kids, but it's those times when I'm not with you, that I want to ask, but I don't want to make it seem like I'm asking just to ask, because then you're going to give me a shallow answer just to shut me up. So the more we just share, and that's a regular part of what we do, then my child becomes a blabbermouth. Well, this happened, and so I get, and I know Edwina's laughing because she knows my child, right? So then she gives me the whole shebang. But constantly, I think that for parents, like a really, quick tidbit, like as you're watching television, for example, like start to process with your child and ask them what they think about what it is that they're seeing, right? So because sometimes it's easier to like practice outside yourself than it is, the same way it's easier to give everybody else advice than to take your own. So when you're watching television or they're listening to music, but especially when they're watching television, they get to see people interacting, right? Start to ask them questions about, how do you think this person's feel? What do you think about that? And also tell them how you feel about it. And then, what I've seen in my own household is that my child now regularly talks about what it is that she observes, and how what she observes affects her, and how what is said to her affects her, because we have normalized kind of analyzing interactions with people, and normalized talking about the impact of words and actions on people as well. So, that's just one thing. TV, use television watching to get advantage. If they're watching it anyway, start to debrief with them right on the spot. Right on the spot.
Yeah, I want to kind of piggyback on that. And as a mom of a teenage boy, another thing that, I create opportunities for him and I to just kind of be alone. And I kind of take my mom hat off a little bit, and I become like that homegirl that you want to have that conversation with, and I create that safe space for him to kind of be comfortable sharing with me what's going on, and I always remind him, hey, this is a safe, non-judgmental space. So, hey, you don't get in trouble for sharing how you feel. You don't get in trouble for when you're struggling, or when you're angry, or when something is upsetting you. Those are all normal behaviors. I said, so I definitely encourage parents to keep those lines of communication open, be all up in their business. You know what I'm saying? For me, what surprised me is my son he actually liked me being in his business, and I told him, hey, listen, my job is to be on your team. I'm Team J, and my job is to make sure that you're okay, and to protect you, and to make sure you're okay in every area of your life. And he kind of looked at me like, That's what's up. So parents get involved. Like, ask the questions. They really want you to. They want to know that you care. They want to know that you want to be involved in what's going on with them. And so really, it has really helped the dynamics of our relationship grow. And I'm watching him as a young Black man express himself. When he's struggling in class, when he's, everything from A to Z, when he want to talk about girls. All of those things. And so, it's important to don't be afraid to go there, in all of your relationship. If you feel that inkling and you feel like something might be a little off, don't be afraid to open that door to have those conversations.
Thank you for sharing that. And the only thing I'll add before we move on to our second topic is also lead by example. So if you want your kids to share, I know that, when I was growing up, I didn't see, not just in my household, but in a lot of households, I didn't see parents sharing also how they were feeling, right? You kind of knew because they, you're going to act out the way that you're feeling most of the time. But I felt like, growing up, I saw like this really, really clear line of demarcation. Like, this is adult business, this is child. But if the kids never see adults emoting and in a positive way, not just lashing out, like, and I'm not saying anger is a negative emotion, it is an emotion. But what can become negative about one's expression of anger is when it's destructive, right? And when it destroys relationships. And so I think that, I know a lot of children have seen that, but they haven't seen parents actually sit with them and say, hey, I'm angry about this, not throwing things, not breaking things, not being violent and aggressive, but just talking and saying, this is how I'm feeling. And I think that more of them need to see us in that way. And the more that we model for them that this is how you express your emotions. Anger is just one of them, right? Just like love is one of them. Anger is just one of them. It doesn't have to be harmful. It's actually a good thing, right? You're just expressing yourself. So speaking of which, I just want to talk just for a few minutes about, which we've kind of touched on, but mental health and like the impact on our lives. So I literally want this time to be thinking about from the I perspective, what are some ways that we've seen our own, mental health matters kind of show up and impact our lives and or be impacted by our lives. So I know that it's a cycle. So yeah, any one of you wish to begin with that?
I want to share because this is actually going right from where you left off with us modeling for our children, because I just remember as a child not seeing any emotions, not really having someone to talk with on a regular, like an adult communicating, like, how are you? What's going on? How was your school day or whatever? And I was a excellent child. So I just want to let y'all know that. Okay.
Excellent.
I know I'm an awesome adult, but my goodness, as a child, it was like, she is like the star student. But I feel like I was, I'm a very observant person. I am, and I grew up like very quiet. I take everything in, and I just, I'm more of a listener than a talker. And I feel like I'm still like that today, but like showing emotions was something that, and I still feel like I don't know, like it's uncomfortable for me, where there was no like, I love you and giving hugs and things like that. Like I didn't grow up in like a real touchy, emotional, I'm African, yo. I don't know if you all know this, but the African household is normally a little bit more harsh when it like, so emotion isn't like freely shown. And so as an adult with children, it was very uncomfortable for me because I know I did not want to follow that pattern, because I know I needed that, I needed to feel like someone loved me and someone cared for me. And so I don't want to be the parent who I don't like, my children don't feel like I care or I love them, but I needed to find a way to go out of myself. And so that was something that I had to kind of like learn to get out of my uncomfortable feeling or whatsoever. And I will have to say that my children actually poured that out of me. So that became, once you became a mother, it was like more natural. So that's just like one part of it. But I just feel like mental health personally is something where, because I never kind of led off of emotions, I never like stopped to deal with a lot of the things that I was going through. I just kind of did it, I just, so people, say these abusive things to me, they do these abusive things to me, and it's like I just suppress everything. I keep everything down and I just keep going. And then eventually I come to a place where I stop going. I'm not moving. And it's like I'm just kind of living in a world where I'm kind of going through the motions. And so that's when I started to realize, like, yeah, something is off and I cannot continue on this cycle where it's just, I'm at a standstill, but life is still happening. And it's like, it's like I'm trying not to stop, because if I stop, I have to process it. And then I have to go through like the entire thing. And eventually that's what happened. And then I had to reach out for like therapy. I had to finally come to like, okay, it's either I go see somebody, I need to talk to somebody about this. Somebody needs to hear what I got to say, because I don't know how long I can go on this way, so that's my little personal story on mental health is the need for therapy definitely became a major, a dire need, I should say, a very dire need for me. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And we're going to actually go ahead and wrap up. I think that you really touched on so many things. And I think it's a great time for all of us to kind of share like what's in your toolbox. So given I'm thinking about Edwina, I'm thinking about Nafisa, Chantel, I'm thinking definitely about myself. And so I know from our conversations is so much of what Edwina shared resonates with us. And if you're watching out there, please let us know in the comments if what, not just what Edwina just shared, but what any of us shared tonight has resonated with you. We'd really love to know that. And so we're going to end this episode by just sharing what is in your toolbox, right? So what is something, ladies, when we feel ourselves kind of in that space, right? We know what that space is. What is one or two things that's in our toolbox? And Afisa, I want to hear from you first. So what is in one or two things in your toolbox?
Definitely prayer, for sure. Definitely prayer and meditation.
Thank you. How about you, Chantel?
I'm going to have to piggyback on that prayer and meditation. But I'm also going to add affirmations. It is a must that we affirm ourselves. It's a must that we do that. So we have to learn how to speak life over ourselves at all times.
Love that. Yes, Edwina, how about you?
I love that. Affirmation, I would say sleep. Like I always feel a lot better after a good night rest.
Yes.
That's right.
And, I'll just say great relationships. So that's in my toolbox. I thank God for each of you and others who are in my circle. Thank you all for sweetening my life like honey. I love it. All right. So I hope that you all will join us. Two snaps to that one, right? Hope that you all will join us next week as we continue this conversation talking about mental health. And if there's anything that you would like us to specifically dive into and or our guest speaker that we will be having on 2 episodes from now, then please let us know. We want to make sure that we are talking about the things that you want to hear about and engage with. So thank you as always for tuning in to Brown Girls Sound Off, where we center and amplify the voices of women of color. Please don't forget to like and share our videos. And if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe and let everyone know that we are here. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your night. We'll see you next time. Bye.